Our first two guests have been leading the fight for Aboriginal women's rights for decades, and we're proud to bring them back into the spotlight today as their journey has been extraordinary. Judy Gingell, founder and director of the Yukon Native Brotherhood in 1969. During the 1970s and 80s, served as the executive council for the Yukon Indians Women's Association, founding director of Northern Native Broadcasting, elected president of the Yukon Indian Development Corporation in 1980, chair of the Council of Yukon Indians from 1989 to 1995, appointed as commissioner of the Yukon 1995 to 2000, awarded the Order of Canada in 2009, and also awarded the Order of Yukon in 2019. Adeline Weber, a career that spans over 30 years fighting for Indigenous rights in the Yukon, worked tirelessly towards the recognition and acknowledgement of Aboriginal women's rights since the 1970s, founder of the Yukon Indian Women's Association in 1974, founder and former president of the Whitehorse Aboriginal Women's Circle, appointed as administrator to the Yukon in 2018, honorary lifetime member of the Skookum Jim Friendship Center, awarded the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal, and also the Yukon's Commissioner Award for Public Service. Please welcome to the stage Judy Gingell and Adeline Weber. So we'll begin with some general questions. Obviously, that we're celebrating the 50th anniversary. Can you give us a little sense, Judy, what it was like for women behind the scenes in 1970s and 1980s?
Well, back then I was the, for the Yukon Native Brotherhood, I was the secretary. I held that position, and being the only woman that was sitting on the board of directors for the Yukon Native Brotherhood, and I was also a non-status woman. And the Yancey organization was up and running and getting organized at that time, but regardless of the federal government's, we call it branding back then, who has the rights to brand our people. And regardless of being a non-status, the chiefs of the Yukon that I worked with didn't see that, didn't really recognize that. I'm who I am, and I was part of the group that worked so hard. What was the question?
Yes. What it was like for you as there we go. Not only as an individual, but also for a woman that obviously growing up in the situation that you did, and the expectancy, obviously, particularly from your father, to help get involved.
Yeah. I was recruited back in 1969 as a band manager. I have to say the band manager because that's what it was back then. Whitehorse Indian Band, which were governed by the Indian Act. So I was recruited by then, and that time Elijah was going to become the president of the Yukon Native Brotherhood. So he had to leave the position as the chief of the Whitehorse Indian Band. So when I got recruited and got involved, and I never looked back from then. But the saddest part for me when I was going through all this and thinking back is I had to leave my little boy at home many times, and like Jeannie said, you know, we were gone many, many times. And yesterday I brought him as my guest to the dinner with the Prime Minister. I thought I owed him a nice good meal with the Prime Minister. So he came, and I was just so grateful because there was a lot of times that your children would cry for you because you don't know how long you're going to be gone. And I remember one time, and he said, "Oh, Mom, don't go, don't go." He said, "I don't like Dad's cooking. He just gives us bacon and eggs and potatoes." So it's very timing, and but I have no regrets, no regrets.
Thank you, Judy. And Adeline, can you talk a little bit of what it was, not only fighting for Aboriginal women's rights back in the 60s and 70s, but what was it like for you, and why the inspiration to take a leadership role?
Well, it was not a very good period for First Nation women in the community. We didn't have a lot of respect from the general community, and we didn't have rights because we were also non-status. Mm-hmm. We were non-status, and we had to start looking at ways that we could become involved in the government and the First Nation, because it was the brotherhood, and you had to be status to be really involved. And so we started working with people like Margaret Jo, and others to form the Yukon Association of Non-Status Indians, and through that we got participation. And as a Yukon Indian Women's Association, I was the president for a couple of years, and Judy was the vice president. And we fought for rights for our women, not only our women, but our families, because that was so important to us to get the recognition, because, you know, there were women that were not First Nation people, and yet they had all the rights that we did not have, and their children, and yet our children, in some cases, were full-blooded First Nation person, and they didn't have rights. So that wasn't right. So, you know, the reason we got involved is to get the rights that we so much deserve, you know.
And could you see examples across the country where other jurisdictions were taking the same stance, if you will?
Pardon me?
Could you see other examples across the country where women's rights were being not only being promoted, but, you know, being exercised, if you will?
Yeah, in fact, when Yancey was formed in '73 as well, I had the good luck to be nominated, and I went to a national women's meeting, Indigenous women's meeting in Saskatchewan. So I came back and shared that information, and then there's the Native Women's Association of Canada. So, you know, we were involved in that. And then also, as members of Yancey, we participated in the Native Council of Canada, the national, all kinds of national organizations. And in fact, we even had the Indian Rights for Indian Women's organization for a few years. Yeah. So that, you know, we fought long and hard to get our rights, and thankfully somebody finally listened.
For sure. And Judy, just in regards to the community dynamic as the negotiations advanced, what was the emotions, or what was the, you know, the passionate, the discussions that were happening in each community that you can reflect on?
Well, I always brag about this and how important it is to bring your people together. And we brought representative from each of the 12 communities in the Yukon. At that time, there was 12. And we made sure the chief was there, the elder was there, and council members. We even had a spot open for the youth, which was really important. So every time one little item comes up, our people from the community were called in to discuss that item very thoroughly. So there was a lot of, it wasn't done fast, it was well thought out. I think I heard sometimes some people would say something about the agreements. What were they thinking about then? But I think the important part that's missing to me right now is the intent.
Yes.
Is listen to what is some of the intent, why certain things were brought this way. So these agreements were well discussed and thought out, and it was ratified at a General Assembly.
Yes, and it was very, I had the fortunate opportunity to have breakfast at Mabel and Percy Henry's house, and they brought out a letter from 1975 that was addressed to Chief Elijah at that time to say the Northern Nations aren't really happy with the way the progress is happening. We're kind of being felt like we're being left out of the discussion. Was there positivity throughout the community, or could you see resistance just from people not maybe understanding or willing? Because obviously without the 100 years of being depressed and to be in this situation, our people weren't necessarily open arms to these discussions as well. Can you talk a little bit about some of the maybe the pushback that you felt in community?
Oh yes, there were pushbacks from the community, and like I said, we sat there thoroughly and discussed a lot of these items until people were satisfied. And the other thing, we got criticized for hiring a lot of lawyers, but you know what? They were needed. And a lot of our support people that were there. So when an item come up, it'll, you know, I looking back and thinking now, a lot of our decisions were made on consensus. Because you know, when you vote, you don't have a united front, right?
That's right.
So a lot of our discussion, I can't say it anymore. We just kept talking it over and over and over until people really felt that this is what we want.
For sure. And Adeline, for obviously with women that have not only been disenfranchised, but how was it for you to not only be able to get in the room to have your voice, but also how the significance of having a voice at that point in time?
Well, it was really important because when I was president of the Indian Women's Association, I was able to participate with many of the discussions that were going on. Even though we weren't properly recognized, we still did that work. And I have to say that all of my work was all volunteer, and a lot of my work that I continue to do today is volunteer.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Sheesh. Judy, what did it mean for you to be the only woman in the delegation that traveled to Ottawa in 1973?
I don't know. I was just part of the crowd and I had a duty to do, so I just did it, you know. And the funny thing about that, if a lot of you people see the photo when we're standing on the Parliament there, I'm the only one that had a traditional wear. Yeah. Besides Ray Jackson, he had his moose hide jacket. When we left the Yukon, we're all getting excited, and they said, make sure you wear your regalia. Get your vests out. Get your jackets out. You got to wear this when you go see the Prime Minister. Okay. My mother did up a beautiful dress for me. I hope someday I will ever find that dress back, but I don't think I'll fit into it. But so when we were rushing out of our room to go to the Parliament, I put my dress on. I forgot my slippers at home. I had my street shoes on. And stood there, and it was just me walking in the bus there with this beautiful dress my mother made for me. And it didn't dawn on me a day before, Irene Smith, Elijah's wife, we were helping my father, Johnny Smith, who was the chief then, to find a three-piece suit. And I thought, why are we doing this three-piece suit, but we're running around? Because we need to get those pants hemmed and all this and that, so we're getting my dad all dressed up, and it still didn't dawn on me, like, hey, Dad, where's your vest? You know? But no, it didn't really, you know, I'm so grateful for the time that I was in leadership, the respect and the trust that the people had in me. And it didn't matter if I was a status, non-status. I'm Judy, and hey, you tell me how high to jump, I'll jump.
Sheesh. And Adeline, just in regards to your involvement at a very young age, what is your message to the young ladies and the young women of today, and the ones that really want to be involved in regards to what their community work has done? What is the message that you provide to them?
I suppose the message I would give to them is that, you know, they have every right to be sitting at the table, and I'm so proud of so many who have become involved at the community level, and especially very, very, very proud of all the women chiefs that we have and deputy chiefs in the Yukon. I'm really pleased about that, because you know, at the time when we were first working as women looking to get our rights and for our families, we were not very popular, you know, and they all said, oh, you just want to go on someplace and burn your bras. I said, no, I need all the support I can get. But I also want to acknowledge the young people that are coming up now with the language and all of that you know, they're really making us proud that you know, the work we did is now coming to fruition. And I also want to recognize all those people who were there, you know, way back when, that don't always get recognition. And I'd like to acknowledge all of you. And I just want to say for sure, Gerald Isaac is sitting in the crowd. My husband, Bill, has been very involved in Yukon Association of Non-Status Indians, others in the room who have worked very, very hard to make sure that these days are what they are now. So I really want to say thank you for sure.
Sheesh. And just to continue on that, I know that government has not always looked upon the women's organization to fully fund it, let alone now, thankfully, under the work of our Deputy Premier, under the MMIWG, the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls, now we're starting to see necessary resources that are being reflected. You talked about volunteering and putting your time forward. Are you now starting to see not only the, some of the commitment from government, if you will, towards this process, but also now starting to see the society buying into the things that you advocated for 40, 50 years ago for?
Yeah, definitely. We are being recognized now, but it really makes a difference because our organizations were able to hire the people we need to hire to do the work, but there's still, the executive are still unpaid. So yeah, that's the only, I keep saying there's got to be a way to pay us, but if we're part of the board of directors, because we're under societies, we aren't able to be paid. But it isn't always pay that you want. I'm just happy that we were able to accomplish what we have for women and women's rights and children, for sure, because it's our children that we are always looking forward to having a better future for.
For sure. And Judy, you come with many recognitions and acknowledgements. How important is it for us to not only acknowledge and recognize particularly our women in this, but what is the significance when you do get acknowledged by your peers and let alone your community?
Well, I feel that when the acknowledgement does come through, it really tells the world who we are as people. And it's not just me. It takes a lot of people to help one or two individuals to move ahead and move forward on their journey and their path. And I just like to say that, the women are the matriarch in our family. And that was so important why we really had to make sure that the women have their roles and responsibility in place there. And to be respected and be honored for that, we have a duty. I mean, you get your identity through your mother. Mm-hmm. And we really support, our community as we move forward on the different issues and items that is before us. So when I do get a recognition, it does say a lot. And I'm just so proud that I had the support to keep going forward. And people always ask me, when are you going to retire? And I said, there's lots up there yet. So yes. We'll see when that time comes.
Gonna cheese for that. And just to wrap things up, Judy, is there a moment in time or an individual or an experience that really you got to be thankful for, that really inspired you or really, is still resonating with you today? Someone that may have encouraged you, or just a moment in time that really still reflects with you? Well,
I feel I'm a visionary person, and my grandfather, Billy Smith, and so was my dad, Johnny Smith. And they have leadership in the past. And I really think I've inherited that, and I move forward on that. And thank the Lord, we have a lot of elders that are not here with us today, but they did a book. They left a book with us, and their teaching still continues with us. So I think, thinking back and working with a lot of the elders, I want to say, really played a very important role through this whole land claims negotiations. They kept us young ones on track. Sometimes we think we want to get really radical. Well, they call us back. They call us back and lay the law down, like things like, we want the whole Yukon. Who's going to run it? And they said, the non-natives been here for quite some time. They're part of our family. We have children. We have grandchildren. You're going to have to work and get along with each other's. You can't run the whole Yukon. You got to work with the different governments and the industry here in the Yukon. You need to work together and have partnership, because you can't do it yourself. So it was very good teaching. The elders that were around the room, I can still hear them today. When something comes up, their teaching always comes forward and really helps me move forward in that way.
Oh, geesh. And Adeline, is there a person or a moment in time that's really been inspirational to you in your leadership, and maybe that still resonates with you today?
Well, of course, my mother.
Oh.
My mother. And all the women, the elders in our communities, they really inspire me, and they've taught me a lot. And the respect that I get from the community, I really do appreciate. And it's the elders like Angela, like others, Annie Ned, Kitty Smith, and like I said, my mother, and all of the people from my First Nation for sure, and around the Yukon. I really appreciate that. Gunchish.
Oh, sheesh. Well, Judy and Adeline, I'd just like to thank you very much for kicking off the speaker series. It's always a pleasure to interview, and I just want to thank you all as well for being a part of our advisory committee as we prepared for the 50th annual celebration. So with that, just want to say we'll be right back after a couple of great songs from 1973, and we'll be lining up our next guest. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks.